Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to our first official meeting for Math 101. Though we met last time, but we just did an orientation for the class, touring you around Canvas and MS Teams and other particular housekeeping matters. So I hope you guys, actually, I still notice that some of you are not yet or do not have Microsoft Teams. Account yet. So it is highly advantageous, though not required, to have an MS Teams account. Because if you have a Microsoft Teams account, you don't need to wait for me to upload or give you a link to the meeting recordings. You can just go to the meeting link or to the meeting thread in our live sessions channel in the Math 101 team. Tapos makikita nyo na kagad sa dulo ng chat, ng thread o nung comment section yung recording for the meeting. And yeah, you can do it immediately right after we do the class. Siguro a couple of minutes, magre-record si Teams, isa-save niya. Pero after that, you can readily access it. Though ngayon I still have the luxury of time to upload it in YouTube and then share to you the link via Canvas right away. So, pero pag natabunan na ako ng mga gagawin, it might take me a little bit more time to upload the meeting recordings, right? Okay, so for today, we'll go over the certain parts of the work text. This is contained in the study guide for week 2. So it's entitled Validity of Propositional Arguments. So last week, in the lecture, we did an orientation for the class, but we also expected you to review during the second meeting or the second lecture meeting of the class, which we didn't hold synchronously, to study or to review things that you have learned in AMAT 19 or MAT 20, which is your introductory course, the introductory chapter in logic. So you did their propositional calculus. So you did construct truth tables, tas sinest nyo yung truthfulness ng compound propositions. And then I think also you did check the equivalency of two compound propositions. So here we'll take it a notch higher when we talk about validity of propositional arguments. So at the end of the week, these are the three things that you must be able to do. First, determine the validity of a propositional argument using the direct and indirect method. Second is to provide a formal proof of validity of propositional arguments. And third is to determine the most appropriate type of formal proof to be used in proving a given argument. Hopefully for today, we can cover at least the first half of Objective 1. And then next meeting would be Objective 2 and the rest of Objective 1. But Objective 3 is kind of an integrative objective. So this is basically, you gain this by answering practice problems, okay? So, kaya kailangan nyo rin mag-practice on your own because again, math is not a spectator's game. You need to try it on your own, struggle, and then ask for help, either from me or from your lab instructors if you find some things difficult, all right? Okay, so topic 1, so I won't go through each of these. I'll just go along and move on depending sa pace ng klase natin. But at the end of the study guide, you'll see worksheet number 2, okay, which will be due on Monday, right before midnight. So you can try it on your own, or if you don't have time during the week, you can do it during your laboratory classes and ask the help of your laboratory instructors on how to answer these problems if you find some difficulty. But it is highly encouraged that you already tried this before the lab classes para alam nyo na yung mga specific questions na itatanong nyo sa inyong mga lab instructors, okay? Again, this is for, we want to see a valid attempt from you guys before you can earn the 5 points for worksheet number 2. Okay. So with that, let's start. Formally, validity of arguments, the method of deduction. Okay. So before you just check the truthfulness or the truth values of compound propositions and possibly the equivalence of two compound propositions. Now we will evaluate the validity of logical arguments. Pero medyo may technical meaning yung arguments. It's a little bit different from the arguments or from the use of the term arguments in layman's English. So here we define in definition 1.4.1 what the logical argument is. So a logical argument, or simply an argument, is a set of declarative sentences which has premises that describe the ideas, facts, and assumptions, and it has a second part which is a conclusion. So basically, you can think of it as a string of propositions. So the first few parts of that sequence of propositions are called your premises, and the last part, usually at the end of the list, would be what we call the conclusion. So the goal of evaluating the validity of an argument is to check whether the conclusion part of the argument follows directly from the premises or the propositions right before the conclusion. So in remark 1.4.2, we see here how a logical argument is usually written in symbols. So here we have premises, P1 until Pn. So yan yung mga premises, the first few statements in your argument. And then it is followed usually by a single statement, which is called the conclusion. So parang pinagtahi-tahi lang sila ng mga propositions. The first, usually all but the last proposition are the premises, and the last one is the conclusion. So, and usually ito yung isang way ng pagsusulat sa kanya. Kino-conjunct lang natin yung mga premises, and then at the last part, we write the conclusion. Okay. Now, medyo kakaiba siya sa argument sa English kasi sa English pag sinabi nating argument nagtatalo-talo tayo. Pero synonymous use or another use of the term argument ay itong list of premises and a conclusion. And again, for the validity, we will test. Magpa-follow ba yung conclusion coming from the premises? Okay? Just a caveat here, when we say an argument is valid, we are saying that the conclusion follows directly from the premises. So it doesn't matter whether the premises are true. For the sake of the argument or for the sake of checking the validity of the argument, we will assume the premises to be true, and we will just evaluate, does the conclusion follow directly from the premises? Okay? Now, to illustrate this, let's look at illustration 3. Pag nag-refer pala ako to a particular part of the work text, minsan babasahin ko na lang yung last digit nung label. Kasi dito naman, nasa section 1.4 tayo ng work text, kaya ayun yung first few digits. Unit 1, section 4, and then this is the third numbered statement. So usually, sabihin ko na lang number 3. It's quite a mouthful to state the entire number. So in number 3, we see an illustration of arguments. Number 1, either Jan owns a Honda or a Nissan. So it's a proposition. So it qualifies as a premise. Actually, it's a compound proposition, right? So it's a disjunction kasi meron kang connective na or. So that tells us na yung mga premises dun sa argument need not be simple propositions. Pwedeng compound propositions yung mga premises. Okay? So this is a declarative sentence. It is a proposition because it could have a truth value. But again, for checking validity, we are not concerned whether this compound proposition is true. Gusto lang nating malaman o ang itetest natin later, will the conclusion follow from all the premises? Again, we assume the premises to be true. Okay? Well, the second sentence here says John does not own a Honda. So again, this is a claim of something, or this is a claim of a fact. So it's a proposition. So it qualifies as a premise. And then the last sentence is the conclusion. Therefore, she owns a Nissan. So usually conclusions in an argument are preceded by some keywords, namely therefore, hence, thus, yung mga paboritong mga words ng mga mathematicians. So it's actually easy to spot what the conclusion is. Usually it's in the end of an argument, and preceded by those keywords I just mentioned. Okay. So number 1 is an argument. So you see here, the arguments doesn't need an argument doesn't need to be something mathematical. It could just be a statement of fact. So you can see this in everyday life. So yeah, hindi siya kailangang mathematical in nature. But the second example is more mathematical, or actually is mathematical in nature. Let's see what it says. First sentence, if x is a real number such that x is less than -2 or x is greater than 2, then x squared is greater than 4. So, ano ang tawag sa ganitong klase ng proposition? Anyone? Do you remember? First sentence of illustration 2. Ano nga yung tawag sa ganyang proposition? It's a compound proposition. What type? Tandaan niyo ba? Okay, Mark said it's an implication. So, yeah, I know what you're trying to say. Pero ano yung technical term? So, yeah, understood ko na yung implication. So this is a conditional statement, right? So it's an if-then statement, implication, or conditional statement. Okay, so that's correct. Another compound proposition. And then we have the conclusion right away, the second sentence. Again, the key word here is therefore. So we know what to follow would be the conclusion in the argument. So the conclusion here is another conditional statement. If x squared is less than or equal to 4, then x is greater than or equal to -2, and x is less than or equal to 2. Okay, again, our goal is not to evaluate the truthfulness of the propositions in an argument. The main point of checking the validity of an argument is to see if the conclusion follows from the premises. Again, assuming that the premises are true. Okay, so in order for us to do this, let's take advantage of the skills that you have already earned, either from Math 20, AMAT 19, or from the previous week's review. So tingnan natin paano natin magagamit yung mga tools natin before para ma-evaluate yung validity ng isang argument. But remember, yung mga ginawa niyo dati is symbolic logic, right? So you transform everything into symbols, each proposition denoted by a single letter, and then you constructed truth tables. So for starter, we'll abide by those things and try to take advantage of those skills to check the validity of given arguments. So the first step there is to translate the English sentences or English propositions into symbols, okay? Now, there are two ways on how to write an argument symbolically, either vertical or horizontal manner. So for instance here, in this example, balikan natin tong example 1. Ito yung nasa remark 4, right? So we will denote by H the fact that John owns a Honda, and N the fact that, or the proposition that John owns a Nissan. So if you go back to the first sentence here, okay, so either John owns a Honda, so this will have an H. Kasi Honda, H stands for John owns a Honda, and then John owns a Nissan is denoted by an N, okay? And then the connective OR is denoted by this symbol, sort of a V-like symbol, right? So that means the first premise is H or N, and you see that here, okay? So that's the first premise. The second premise, John does not own a Honda. So Honda, pero hindi daw siya nagmamay-ari ng Honda, so we put a negation before it. So therefore, the second premise is not H. And if you are writing the argument horizontally, so you put the second premise here, and then we conjunct all of the premises. Remember, sabi natin dun sa remark kanina, lahat ng premises, kinoconjunct lang natin. Pinagsasama-sama lang natin using the connective and lahat ng premises. So, this is our premise 1, the first sentence in the argument. This is premise 2 in the argument. And then let's connect them using the connective N. And then the conclusion, if you go back to the sentence or to the English argument, she owns a Nissan. So the conclusion is N. So we use the double struck arrow to denote the conclusion, right? So thus, or it implies the conclusion, which is N. So in horizontal form, ito yung itsura ng argument. Okay? However, medyo tedious kapag masyado ng maraming propositions o sobrang compound na ng bawat premise dun sa argument. So usually mas preferred nating isulat siya in a vertical manner in which each line of your argument represents one of the premises. So premise number one, remember, is H or N. So that's the first line of my vertical argument here. And then not H is the second premise. And then to separate the premises from the conclusion, we usually put a horizontal line, parang yung equal sign natin nung elementary days na nag-a-add tayo ng fractions using vertical method, right? Or nag-a-add ng numbers pala, hindi fractions. So we have that vertical line. And then we usually put three dots. If you remember, the three dots signify therefore to emphasize that this last line actually is the conclusion. Okay? So now, these are the two ways on how to represent the argument symbolically. And usually this is the first step before we can even go into checking the validity of an argument. All right? Pero crucial yung step na to kasi kailangan nating i-transform yung English sentences into symbols. And the rest of the things that we will do is hinge on the fact that we have, or to the assumption that we have represented the argument symbolically in a correct manner. Okay. All right. Questions so far? So hopefully wala pa naman masyado. That's just an introduction to arguments. Now, the main meat of today's discussion is when can we say that an argument is valid? Again, intuitively, we say that an argument is valid if the conclusion follows from the premises. It doesn't matter whether we know for a fact that the premises are true. For the sake of the argument or for the sake of checking the validity of an argument, we will assume that all the premises are true. So, ang kailangan lang nating tingnan, nagfo-follow ba yung conclusion mula dun sa mga arguments. And there are several ways to do this. So, in definition 1.4.5, we have the formal definition of what a valid argument is. So, an argument is valid if and only if this is a tautology. So remember, this is a compound proposition. So it's a conditional statement. So pwede nyong i-treat yung argument to be a conditional statement wherein the conjunction of the premises form your antecedent and the conclusion is your consequent. So gusto nating ipakita na tautology itong conditional statement na to. Okay. So this is how we formally define the validity of an argument. Kailangan maging tautology yung conditional statement form with the conjunction of the premises as your antecedent and the conclusion as your consequent. So hopefully tandaan nyo pa kailan nagiging true ang isang conditional statement. Okay? Remember, a conditional statement will be true except when you have a true precedent or antecedent and a false consequent. Okay? Mari-review naman natin yan when we work this example out. Okay? And medyo heavy yung definition because it requires us to show that the conditional statement is a tautology. And it says it's a tautology, meaning for whatever truth values is assigned to each of the propositions involved, dapat true pa rin yung conditional statement. And you see how tedious it will become, especially if we have more and more premises, or actually if our premises are compound propositions. Okay? So let's see an example of how to do this. And we'll go back to the example of John with owning a Honda or a Nissan. That's what is in illustration 7. Okay? So ito yung statement natin kanina or yung argument natin from above. And we want to check whether it is a valid argument. We have seen earlier that it can be written symbolically this way. Okay? So remember, ito yung unang premise at yung pangalawang premise, i-conjunct ko lang sila, pagsamahin ko with a connective and then the conclusion will be the consequent of the conditional statement. So in order to show that this argument is valid, kailangan ko lang ipakita na itong conditional statement na to ay isang tautology. Okay? Or it will be true for whatever truth values of H and N are. Okay? So kailangan kong gumawa ng truth table. And remember, kung merong ilang bang propositions meron tayo dito. Meron tayong dalawang propositions, H and N. Do you remember ano yung formula para malaman natin na na-consider natin lahat ng cases? So kung meron kang N na propositions, ilang rows ng truth tables ang ine-expect nga natin? Anyone? Tandaan niyo pa ba? Kasi kailangan mapakita natin tautology. So kailangan nating ma-take into account lahat ng posibleng truth values ng mga propositions involved. So kung meron akong N na proposition, ilang rows sa truth tables ang ine-expect kong mabuo? Okay, Axel Troy, yeah, that's correct. Thank you. It's 2 to the power N. So kasi bawat isang proposition may dalawang posibleng truth values, true or false. Meron tayong N. So by the fundamental principle of counting, we'll have 2 to the power N. Luckily here, in our example, we only have two propositions, H and N. So kailangan ko lang ng 2 to the power 2 na rows. So kaya meron akong 4. So I will list down all possible combinations for the truth values of H and N. So sa H, meron akong true, true, false, false. Sa N, meron akong true, false, true, false. So, and then I know since I have 4 rows here, ibig sabihin na-consider ko na lahat ng possible combinations. And then let's try to see the truth values of each of the premises. Probably let's start with H or N. Medyo dun sa table sa work text na una lang yung not H. Pero let's probably start with H or N. H or N. Ang connective na OR ay nagiging true kapag ka at least isa dun sa mga disjuncts ay true, right? So it's true or true, it's true. True or false, that's still true. False or true, that's still true. Oops. False or false, that is false. Okay? So this would be the truth values of our first premise. Okay? And then we'll do that also for the second premise, which is not H. So madali lang, negation lang ni H. So babalik na rin lang natin yung truth value. Not true means false. Not true, false. Not false is true. Not false is true. All right? And then we are now ready to get the truth value of the antecedent dun sa ating conditional statement representing our argument. So let's see, what's the truth value of H or N? N, not H. So we'll have this, true and false, false yan. Kasi pagka and yung connective, dapat parehong true. True and false, so that's gonna be false. True and true, oh, that's true. False and true, so that's gonna be false. All right? And then finally, we check the truth value of the conditional statement. So remember, we have here false implying true, so that's gonna be true. False implying false, still that's true. True implying true, that's true. False implying false, that is true. Kasi yung conditional, kung naalala nyo, nagiging false lang siya kapag ka true implying false. Okay? And what do we have here? We have the conditional statement formed by the conjunction of the premises as the precedent and the conclusion as the consequent. At lagi siyang true for whatever the truth values of the propositions involved are. Okay? So dahil doon, makukonclude natin, itong statement na to ay isang tautology. And by definition 5, that means that the argument is valid. Okay? Any questions? I hope it is clear. Kahit isang example pa lang, at least sana na-envision nyo na yung ano yung mangyayari. So just let me know if everything is clear. You can use the reaction buttons. You can use the chat. You can just unmute yourself. So if you have questions, just raise your hands. Gusto ko sana makita yung reactions nyo para alam ko kung titigil ako, babagalan ko, or bibilisan ko. Otherwise, I'll keep going on this pace. Or kung talagang dead ma, okay. Or kung busy kayo, nasa episode 2 na kayo nung pinapanood nyo, okay, that's fine. But hopefully it's clear. So if there are no questions, then I'll proceed with exercise 8. So let's try to answer this one. So the instruction here is to show that the following argument is valid. For now, we have one way to show that an argument is valid, that is, form the conditional statement and then show that it is a tautology. Okay? But example 8 or exercise 8 is written as an English argument, right? So naka-word pa siya, kailangan natin siyang i-translate first. So let's see. So I enlarge example exercise 8 here. So if I study hard, then I will pass this course. I study hard, therefore I will pass this course. So let's start by declaring the variables that we will use here. So I will let S be the proposition that I study hard. And so you can choose any letter that you want. Pero usually ginagamit ko yung mga letters na associated dun sa mismong statement. So basta meron kayong declaration of the variable such as this one, then that's fine. You can use whatever variable you want. And I will use the variable P to denote the proposition that I will pass the course. Okay? At least if you have this sentence, it is clear to whoever will be checking your paper what these variables S and P stand for. Okay? So kaya hanapin namin to. Kung ako yung mag-check, hanapin ko to. Kung di nyo to na-declare, I might give you minor deductions because it might cause some confusion on my part when I'll be reading your work. So hopefully you will write this down. Okay? And then you can go on and say symbolically, the argument reads this way. Okay? Maybe I can write it in a horizontal manner kasi hindi pa naman ganun kahaba yung mga premises. So let's start with the first premise. If I study hard, then I will pass this course. So it is a conditional statement kasi meron kang if-then part. Yung if part ay S kasi study hard. The then part, which is the consequent, is I will pass the course. And this is our first premise. Second premise, I study hard. So we'll have an S in here. And I think that those two are our only premises here. At sabi sa definition ng argument, kailangan lang nating i-end lahat ng mga premises. Okay? And then you can also put a grouping symbol here if you want to avoid confusion or ambiguity. Tapos yung implication or the consequent of the biggest or the outermost conditional statement would be the conclusion. Therefore, I will pass this course. So implication or consequent yung P. You might ask, what if I forgot to write, I write the brackets here? That's still fine kasi meron tayong law of precedence sa mga logical symbols. So ang basa ko pa rin dito ay ito yung antecedent, kasi ito yung consequent. Kasi last sa order of precedence yung implication. Alright? So, but to remove any ambiguity, yung mga nagva-viral na math problems na lahat ay nagtatalo-talo sa PEMDAS kasi kulang ng parentheses or hindi sinulat. So, to avoid those ambiguities, let's just use grouping symbols as often as needed. Okay? Now, to check the validity of this statement, we need to construct a truth table because we need to show that this is a tautology. Okay. So here we want to show. So I usually use WTS for we want to show, and then I usually label this say star para hindi ko paulit-ulit ika-copy paste yung statement na yun. So here we want to show that star is a tautology. Gusto kong ipakita siya ay laging totoo whatever the truth values of the propositions involved are. Here I have two propositions involved, S and P. So kaya kailangan magkaroon ako ng 2 squared na rows dun sa aking truth table. So I'll make a column for S, a column for P. Tapos yung una, true, true, false, false. Yung pangalawa, true, false, true, false. And then let's see the premises. First premise is S implying P. Okay. So here we have true implying true. So that's true. True implying false. That's false. Actually, that's the only time an implication or a conditional statement will be false. So I know that the rest would be true. Okay? Tapos, kukunin ko na yung conjunction ng premises. Kasi yung second premise ay S lang. So pwede ko na siyang tingnan from here. So I'll have this guy to be my second row. My next column, rather. Okay. So here we'll have true and true. So that's going to be true. False and true. So that's going to be false. And then we'll have true and false. So that's going to be false. And then the last one is true and false. So that's still going to be false. Okay? And then finally, pwede ko na lang ditong isulat yung star. Kasi si star na-let ko na siya para i-denote itong line na to. So yung compound proposition star has the following truth tables. So let's see. Kailangan itong conjunction ng mga premises imply P. So let's see. True implying true, that's still true. False implying false, that's still false. False implying true, that's going to be true. Oh, sorry. True pala tong kanina. And false implying false, so that's going to be true. Okay? And finally here, our or the outermost conditional statement, which is again the premises being, or the conjunction of the premises being the antecedent and the conclusion being the consequent, is a tautology kasi lagi siyang true. So therefore we can say the argument or the given argument is valid. Okay. Now again, it's ibang usapan kung nagme-make sense yung argument, okay? But from a logical point of view, this argument is valid because the conclusion follows from the premises. Because again, we don't know na sufficient yung pag-aaral ng gusto para mapasa yung course. Though it makes sense for us, pero not always, okay? So, hindi natin kailangang i-probe kung totoo nga ba ito. But for the sake of the argument, we will assume that the premises are true. And again, when you say a statement is valid or an argument is valid, that means the conclusion follows from the premises. Okay? Any questions? So I hope nababasa niyo yung sulat ko. Pagpasensya na kung hindi maganda yung pagkakasulat. Anyway, any questions? Or is the lesson clear? Magparamdam kayo guys, galaw niyo yung baso. Okay, finally, I got some thumbs up. Thank you. So I hope you can do this. All right, let's see what's next. Okay, now, can you foresee or do you foresee a problem with this way of checking whether an argument is valid? May na-foresee ba kayo na problema with this way of checking validity?
Meron po, sir.
Okay, what's that?
Kung saan po yung premises ay marami, for example, 10, ganon.
Okay.
Sobrang lengthy po na magiging process.
All right. Thank you. Tama ba? It's Prince June?
Yes po.
Okay, thank you. So that's correct. Kasi ibig sabihin kung meron kang 10 arguments or 10 propositions involved in the argument, so you will need to construct 2 to the 10th rows. So 1024 rows dun sa truth table. And actually, hindi naman natin sila kailangang lahat. Tama nga ba? Kasi kung mapapansin nyo, sinasabi ko kanina pa, valid yung argument kung pag inassume natin na true yung premises, mapapakita ba natin na magfa-follow yung conclusion. Alright? So ibig sabihin, concerned lang tayo na assume to be true yung mga premises. So ibig sabihin, actually, for instance, this row, itong second row, okay, hindi naman pala siya kailangan kasi dun sa second row, magiging false yung premise o yung conjunction ng premises. Pero hindi naman tayo concerned dun sa truthfulness ng bawat premise. Lagi nating ina-assume sa pag-check ng validity na totoo kagad yung mga premises. Ibig sabihin, the second row actually is immaterial because there will have a false premise. Likewise, ganun din yung second and third rows. So, ibig sabihin, pwede nating ma-reduce yung number of rows that we need to produce. Hindi natin talaga kailangang ipakita na tautology yung implication. Kailangan natin lang ipakita or may shortcut tayo na pwedeng gawin. Tingnan natin ano yung cases na true yung mga premises, magiging true pa rin ba yung implication dun sa conclusion. And actually, this is justified from the definition's point of view. Kasi remember, pag false yung premise sa isang implication, pag false yung precedent, or yung antecedent, lagi nang true yung implication, right? Kasi nagiging false lang yung conditional statement kapag ka true implying false. Pero pag false implying false o kaya false implying true, lagi na siyang true. So, a false premise or a false conjunction of the premises is not necessary to show validity of the argument. So I think that's what is remark 9 is trying to say. It's trying to say na kailangan lang natin i-check yung cases when the premises are true. So, pwede natin i-construct yung table or yung truth table kahit hindi exhaustively, basta mo-cover natin lahat ng cases na true yung lahat ng premises. Okay? So, on the flip side, if we can find a row where the premises are all true, but the conclusion is false, then we say that the argument is invalid. Okay? Hopefully, we'll see an example. So hopefully that clears things up. Pero medyo tricky pa rin siya ng konti. Kasi kung marami ng propositions involved, kailangan pa rin nating masigurado na wala tayong na-miss na case na true lahat ng premises. Lalo na kung super compound yung bawat premise. So posibleng kailangan pa rin nating i-construct yung 2 to the n na rows, pero pwede nating hindi tapusin yung buong table. Kasi titingnan lang natin yung cases wherein the premises are all true. Okay? Now, let's see. So, okay. Okay, so I think illustration 10 is back to John's case, owning a Honda or a Nissan. So you see here na ano lang yung nagmamatter, aling row lang. So this is row 1, 2, 3, and 4. It looks like na nagiging true lang lahat ng premises in row number 3. So that means it is sufficient to just construct a truth table with just one case, which is the third row, para ma-prove na siya ay valid yung argument. Kasi yung ibang rows, kung papansin nyo, false and true, true and false. So hindi na sila necessary para ma-establish yung yung validity ng argument. But again, sir, hindi ba natin na-violate yung definition? Wala tayong ma-violate kahit hindi natin ipakita yung first, second, and fourth rows because anyway, yung antecedent ay false. And false implying anything will still be true as a conditional statement. So, hindi na talaga necessary yung row na yun. Okay? All right. So, let's move on to example 11. Unfortunately, it's already 10 minutes before the time. So if you guys have something else to do, you can leave the meeting and just watch the recording later. I'll try to finish this para sabay lang tayo with the other lecture section. So if you'll allow me, I'll use the next 5 or 7 minutes. So, pero again, if you have something to do, so you can leave the meeting and just watch the recording later. Okay. So if you'll be staying, I'll go on with example 11. So here we are asked to show that the following argument is invalid. So dahil invalid yung argument, kailangan makahanap tayo ng at least isang case kung kailan true yung lahat ng premises pero false yung conclusion. Okay? So let's look at the problem or the argument. So here we have, if I study hard, then I will pass this course. I passed the course, therefore I studied hard. So here, we denoted by S the statement, I study hard, and by P the statement, I passed the course. So in symbol, ito yung argument. If I study hard, then I pass the course. So the first premise is S implying P. The second premise, I pass the course. So that is just a P. And then dun sa argument, kinonjunct lang natin yung premises. And then the conclusion is I studied hard. So that is an S. Siya yung consequent. All right. So what you can do if there's just a few propositions involved, you can construct a full-on truth table, just as like this one. Okay. So you see here that this is not a tautology because there is a case. Tama nga ba? Di pala niya nilagay yung hindi niya in-include yung table para dun sa actual implication. Pero tingnan natin. So here, various combinations of truth values for S and P. Truth values for S implying P. Sinulat niyo yung truth value para sa proposition P. Okay. So here we have true and true. Okay. Two premises that are true gave rise to a true conclusion. So true implying true. So ibig sabihin, okay, that's fine. Pero kung makikita nyo makikita nyo yung third row. Okay? Sa third row, true yung premise number 1, yung S implying P, so that's true. Ang truth values ni S and P ay false and true. So S implying, that's false implying true, so that's true. And then ang second premise natin ay true. Ayun, galing siya doon. So we have true and true. So ibig sabihin, third row, true yung lahat ng premises. All premises are true. So ibig sabihin, meron kang true, implying, ano yung truth value ng conclusion? The conclusion is S. So the conclusion is, but here S is false. So meron tayong true implying false, making the conditional statement false. So hindi siya tautology kasi yung conditional statement which we form by taking the conjunction of the premises as the antecedent and the conclusion as the consequent ay false, ay hindi tautology. There is a specific case when it is false kasi meron kang true implying false. And actually, in the previous remark, we said na it is sufficient to find a case wherein you have true premises but a false conclusion to conclude that the statement is invalid. So ito yung case na hinahanap natin. Premise number 1 is true, premise number 2 is true, but the conclusion is false, so this is an invalid argument. Now, if you want to be technical, you go back to a definition of a valid argument. Makikita nyo na kung gagawa kayo dito ng additional table, additional column for this statement, tawagin ko itong double star. Gawa kayo dito ng column for double star. So meron kang, meron tayo dito true and true. So we'll have true implying true, so that's true. So this is false and false implying true. So that's false implying true. True pa rin siya. So here, true and true, pero implying false. So false yon. Dito ay true and false. So false implying false, true pa rin siya. Obviously, it is not a tautology. Okay? So either way, you go back to the definition wherein you need to construct a full truth table and show that the conditional statement is not a tautology. So that by definition means that the argument is invalid. But however, you can do a shortcut. You just need to find a case wherein the premises are both true, but the conclusion is false. And that is sufficient to show that the argument is invalid. Okay? Now, in logic, so let's go to remark 12. In logic, the words true and valid have very different meanings. So a valid argument may have a false conclusion, and an invalid argument may have a true conclusion. Again, the idea here is we don't care about the truthfulness of all the premises. To check the validity of an argument, we simply assume the premises to be true, Regardless kung sa totoong buhay true ba sila or false, but for the sake of argument, premises are always taken to be true. And do we see the conclusion follow from these true premises? So it is much more of a test for the structure of the argument rather than the content of the argument. Kasi pwedeng, halimbawa, ito example na to. So if it is a fish, then it is a mammal. If it is a mammal, then it is a human being. Hence, it is a fish, then it is a human being. So here you can test that this statement is, I guess this statement is valid. Okay. So this is valid. Kasi pwede nyo ipakita na tautology yung conditional statement formed by the premises and the conclusion. Pero the entire argument doesn't make any sense in the real world, right? Kasi alam na natin na false yung unang statement in real life. Alam na natin na yung second premise ay false din kasi merong mga mammals na hindi naman human. Pero again, in checking validity, it doesn't matter if the premises are true or not. They are always assumed to be true. So we say structurally, statement 1 is valid kasi you can construct a truth table, you can show it is valid. So the structure of the argument is valid because the conclusion will follow from the premises. Pero in real life, hindi naman siya ganun talaga. Hindi naman acceptable yung argument na to. Pero from a logical point of view, it is valid because the structure of the argumentation is founded on solid grounds. Okay? Statement number 2, I think this is invalid. You can check. This is invalid. Though the conclusion made sense, right? Manila is a crowded city. We know this for a fact. Kaya lang ang problema, hindi nagfa-follow yung conclusion mula dun sa premises. So kahit i-assume mo na true yung premises, hindi naman doon magfa-follow yung Manila being a crowded city. So even though we know the conclusion is true, or we can say that this is true, pero yung pagkaka-argue niya, pagkaka-present niya ng argument ay structurally invalid. Hindi siya acceptable sa logic. Kasi we want the conclusion to follow from the premises presented in the argument. Okay? And to distinguish these two types of argument, we have definition 14. When we say an argument is sound, if and only if it is valid and all of its premises are true. So statement number 1, even though it is valid, pero hindi naman true yung mga premises, okay? Kasi if it's a fish, then it is a mammal. That doesn't make sense. There are fish that are not mammals, all right? So dahil false na isang premise, yung statement number 1 ay valid pero hindi siya sound. Yung statement number 2, hindi na siya kagad sound kasi hindi naman valid yung argument. Okay? Now, probably next meeting we'll start with definition 15, which is about a fallacy. Pero gusto ko lang sabihin na sa parting word, I'm thinking of, I already thought of your the first problem in the problem set number 1, which is basically this. I-describe ko pero yung formal assignment ay bibigay ko siguro tomorrow or on Friday. So ang idea ko sa first problem in problem set number 1 is this. Find an argument in real life, pwedeng sa isang YouTube video or sa isang series yung napanood or may nakita kayong post sa Facebook or meron kayong meme na nabasa which presents an argument. And then you will test whether that argument is valid or not. Okay? So the idea is if it's a video clip, if it's a video clip or something you have watched, pwedeng maglagay kayo ng link on your submission, on a PDF submission, lagay niyo yung link. Kung siya ay meme or post, pwede niyo siyang i-screenshot, tapos i-copy-paste niyo dun sa PDF yung actual argument in English. And then what you can do is to symbolize that argument and then check if it is valid or not. So, siguro a minimum of 2 propositions involved. So, meron 2 propositions involved dun sa argument. At it doesn't matter how many premises are there, but sana meron 2 propositions involved dun sa argument, pwede na siya, i-symbolize nyo siya, test for validity, and then that will be 10 points out of 50 in the first problem set. So I will upload the formal and the detailed explanation of that problem probably tomorrow or Friday in Canvas. Pero at least clear ba yung idea para masimulan nyo ng maghanap? Okay ba yun? Alright? Kasi parang tayong lahat ngayon ay nabubuhay sa social media, naglipa na yung mga arguments. So let's check if these arguments are valid or not, okay? So as soon as you finish and as soon as I have uploaded or I have created the assignment bin for homework 1, then you can, for problem set 1, problem 1, then feel free to submit. Pero yung deadline, susundin natin yung deadline dun sa study guide. Pero pwede nyo siyang simulan ngayon para 4 na problems na lang yung problemahin na sa problem set 1. Okay? All right, I think that's all from me for today. Any questions, any parting thoughts from you guys? Okay ba yung pace or masyadong mabagal? Medyo nabagalan ako pero I don't mind. The important thing for me is naintindihan o klaro yung topics. I hope the topics are clear. Though we have very limited examples, but I guess you can extrapolate from our discussion ano yung gagawin pag komplikado na yung arguments. Okay? But in summary, what we did now is to establish one way in order to show the validity or invalidity of an argument. Okay? Any questions? Parting thoughts? Wala naman? Okay, so if that's the case, then let's call it a day. Thank you all for coming today. I hope you have a good night. And then let's see each other again on Friday. Goodbye, guys.